Doom: The Dark Ages is the latest entry from id Software, launching on PS5, Xbox Series S, and PC on May 12th, and I have one goal here: to figure out if it's a good game and if it's worth the money. To put my cards on the table early, I think Doom: The Dark Ages is an excellent game that has great shooting, pacing, variety, and an okay story. I'll spend the rest of this review unpacking what works, what doesn't, and because the game isn't out yet, I won't be spoiling anything past the first 3 hours of the game. I will show some out-of-context clips from the 6-hour mark, but I won't be spoiling any of the cool boss fights and environments, even though I'd really like to gush about them. Finally, as always, make sure this isn't the only review you watch. Games are 90 Canadian big ones these days, and it's now more important than ever that you are as informed as possible when making a purchase. Okay? Let's get into it. It's appropriate to start with some background, because I never really played the Doom games until the first reboot in 2016, which I liked, but never finished, and the same was true for Eternal. Something about those games didn't quite click with me, and not for any fault of the game, but just because I wasn't necessarily in the mood for it. So I'm coming at this from a very casual standpoint. I also cannot in good faith start this review without disclosing that I was not only given a free review copy of the game, but I was also flown out to LA a few months ago to play the game early, and the whole thing was paid for. It was a great trip, and it was awesome meeting some of the dev team. I don't say this as a defense, but rather in the name of honesty. It's important that you know the full context around a review, and I believe mentioning this is necessary context. Anywho, let's begin with performance. I mentioned in my preview that performance is incredibly important when it comes to an FPS game because, especially on keyboard and mouse, you want everything to feel snappy, and when you have frame rate that is even a little bit unstable, even a slight hitch here or there, you're gonna feel it, and it'll totally pull you out of the game. I'm happy to say that Doom: The Dark Ages did not have a single dropped frame. However, my recordings, especially during cutscenes, had some encoding lag, but you can take my word on it that the game ran fine. However, and this is a big however, I was running this game at 1440p max settings, 60 FPS on a recently upgraded machine with an RTX 5070 Ti, a Ryzen 7800X 3D, and the game was installed on an NVMe. This game requires ray tracing, meaning I imagine it would struggle on machines that are not up to date. I think mandatory ray tracing is really lame, but if you're not sure, I encourage everyone to utilize Steam's excellent refund feature. If you're concerned about performance, then you can buy the game, try it for an hour, and if it doesn't run well, you can refund it with no questions asked. I appreciated that the game ran so consistently because it allowed me to enter a flow state much easier, and I think Doom functions best when you let that subconscious part of your brain take over, and you just instinctively rip and tear. With that in mind, the gameplay still offers room for experimentation, skill, and strategy. I was constantly rewarded for trying new things, and the newest tool we have is the shield saw. Initially, I was concerned for the shield because it didn't strike me as something players could make great use of, but man, was I wrong. And now that I've played the full game, I'm even more wrong. The shield gets constant upgrades throughout the story and is at all points your best friend, and something that actively aids you in being as aggressive as possible, acting as both a means of making enemies vulnerable and helping you close the gap, which is something you'll be doing a lot. The largest change that comes with the shield is not the ability to block, but to parry. Blocking is great and all, but the shield really can't take a whole lot of damage before you need to let it cool down. Every now and then, an enemy will fire a green projectile or swipe at you with a green attack, and these can be parried. Parry timings are very forgiving and the sound is satisfying, but I do wonder if the addition of the parry can impede on the gameplay at times. Some enemies are so large that the best way to stun them at all is to parry them and wait for an opening. This creates moments where we don't have full control over the flow of battle, and when control is directly tied to power, it inhibits the power fantasy. This is tough to criticize though, because we need to switch up gameplay somehow, but I did find myself enjoying these particular enemies less. Otherwise, the shield is great, and I'm saying it right now, if id Software doesn't know what to work on next, for the love of God, make a Captain America game. Shooting with a keyboard and mouse felt impactful, which is extra important given that you don't have the vibration or haptic feedback like you would on a controller. This impact is communicated through the expert presentation, which combines satisfying sound effects and slick animations. The combat shotgun, which you can eventually upgrade to fire in 3-round bursts, sounds like a freaking hammer, and recoils so much that the bottom right of my screen turns into a constant blur. Speaking of blur, all post-processing effects including motion blur can be turned off, and you'll notice that I adjusted the HUD to make it smaller and remove Doom Guy's face. This is because Doom: The Dark Ages, like Doom 2016 and Doom Eternal, is absolutely gorgeous, with extra emphasis placed on the gore part of that word. I want to see as much of it as I can. The other reason I chose to minimize the HUD was that the most important information, like low ammo or low health, is communicated with an admittedly annoying alert in the middle of the screen. This too can be turned off, but I chose not to. Customization is something id had mentioned focusing on, and this sparked the usual debate around difficulty and accessibility, so allow me to throw my 2 cents in on that. Who the fuck cares? Play the game however you want, and besides, people who are worried that there isn't a challenge benefit from all of these difficulty sliders too, because you can make the game exactly as challenging as you want, with a permadeath mode being included on launch, which is really cool. To go back to presentation, the Dark Ages is stunning, and there's so much detail to see in every corner. So much so that I almost felt bad with how much I was moving around during combat. It makes those slower moments between the different encounters feel more meaningful, because you are rarely just walking through a hallway or a corridor. Massive titans will be fighting in the distance, immaculate structures will always hang over the horizon, and we can't talk about fidelity without talking about the demons, and how great it looks to tear them limb from limb. Heavy impacts will leave demons with exposed bones, and the different finishers are just glorious. I had noted that these were toned down compared to previous entries, but now having played the whole game, I want to offer a bit more context around that. Finishers will always play when defeating enemies with a health bar, and they look great. But if you want common enemies to be killed with a glory kill-esque finisher, then executing them from the air will play an animation nearly every time. So if you want them to be more abundant, that's how you can do it. Speaking of my previous video, if you've seen it, then you already know my general thoughts on the combat, which hasn't changed much now that I've played the whole game. I still enjoy the enemy variety, and especially as the game went on, because there were so many different enemies that required different solutions, so I was constantly consulting every tool I had available, and was never allowed to just stick to one method or one strategy. It reminded me a lot of the Arkham games, in that certain enemies could only be attacked by, say, jumping behind them. For Doom, it's the enemies that have armor or shields that need to have them superheated and broken by the shield in order to do damage. Or, in order to destroy plasma shields, you need to shoot it with a plasma gun. Some enemies are best dealt with from afar, some best dispatched up close. There was always something that was keeping my playstyle fluid. The exception to my previous thoughts is that I was shocked at how well the game paced upgrades. Throughout the 22 chapters, I would say there is a new mechanic, enemy, upgrade, or weapon in almost all of them. But it's not just a stream of new things, it's the impact of those things and what they change. For example, early levels continually introduce new guns, but by the time the shield becomes a bit stale, they throw 3 new upgrades towards said shield that change the way you use it. One of the guns shown off in the previews, the Accelerator, is an energy-based SMG that I didn't initially use because it didn't have the same oomph that something like a shotgun does. However, there was an upgrade that allowed me to charge the gun by shooting enemies, and once charged, if I let go of the trigger, a pulse would be sent out that did insane damage. This not only made the gun one of the best I had, but it changed the way I used it. A shotgun is a weapon you want to use with care, as ammo doesn't come too easily, and thus, you don't want to miss shots. With this upgraded Accelerator, I was encouraged to keep firing, meaning I was always flicking my mouse around like a madman trying to find the next demon I could build charge off of. I don't want to talk about the upgrades much more because I feel the moments where you acquire them are some of the best, and it feels like a spoiler to give it away. The build up to the new weapons are electric, no doubt aided by the music, which this time around is produced by Finishing Move Inc., and it's pretty good. However, it still reminds me of how shittily Mick Gordon was treated, and this, with all due respect, doesn't come close to Gordon's work on 2016 or Eternal. To get back to pacing, I want to mention that I am impressed with how well id has responded to the feedback they got during the previews. During said previews, myself and a few others noted that the dragon sections were a tad long and tedious, given how much of it was just shooting and dodging basic attacks, and further frustrating because of how inconsistent the dodge timings were. This has been completely alleviated. The dragon segments have been cut down, the tedium has been eliminated, and the dodging feels much better, making these segments a ton of fun to play. In regards to some comments I had gotten, some were worried that the dragon and Atlan sections would take up too much time, and potentially distract from the core shooting, ripping, and tearing gameplay, and I'm happy to say that it is not the case. They were always short enough to not overstay their welcome, and because they were spaced out well, I was always excited to see a new section show up. The only issue this could cause is that some who don't like the Atlan or Dragon sections at all will have no way to skip it, as they are mostly integrated directly into levels. Also, all bugs that were noted in the preview were gone, and I couldn't recreate them at all. In fact, I had no bugs on my playthrough, which feels so rare for a AAA release. Level design, as mentioned in the previews, was wider than I had expected, but I'm grateful that there is plenty of linearity too. I think the push to make levels open and vast is one that can backfire heavily, and I'm glad the Dark Ages doesn't fall into that trap. Some of these open levels could literally take over an hour to comb through all of it, assuming you aren't using a guide, but otherwise most levels, if rushing the objective, will take about 30 minutes each. On top of collectibles and secret rooms and challenges, there are 3 tasks you're given at the start of each chapter, which were nice because they offered upgrade materials and encouraged me to play in different ways. Once you complete all of the upgrades for a weapon, you'll unlock a mastery challenge, which when completed offer a special reward that I won't spoil. The aforementioned secret areas were good, not just because it felt rather old school seeing a pop-up saying you found a secret area, but because the means of reaching these were clever and fun. They were the right kind of challenge I would want in a game like this, where the puzzle requires you to stop and think, but you won't be confused or puzzled for very long, allowing the pacing to be maintained. These secret rooms all follow a design philosophy id had employed, which was a desire to go back to the series' roots. Where this also seemed to have manifested in is the gameplay, which is designed to be a bit slower. Do note that it is still intense and plenty fast, but boss fights especially are slowed down significantly to the point where I wish they were a bit tougher. I can't show any of what I'm talking about without spoiling it, but I felt that some of the late game bosses were underwhelming because their attacks weren't all that hard to dodge, and in the case of the final boss, it was shockingly easy. They were still fun for the spectacle, and I'm sure on harder difficulties there's more of a challenge, but when considering the difficulty curve of the game, things keep ramping up during the individual encounters, and then the big bad barely puts up a fight. I also wish there were more unique boss fights. Most of the ones you'll fight will be the enemies you have fought before, but now with a considerably larger health pool, and that's great and all, but it did mean that I was never surprised. At least there were still plenty of individual moments that gave me a run for my money, and I died plenty on my first playthrough. Of course, said playthrough this time around has a story, which id had explained was a point of focus for them. The story is just fine. It's there, thought out, and there are characters, villains, heroes, but man, I just could not get invested in it. I appreciated the codex entries as they contextualized the world, and I like reading those, but most of the overarching narrative was very basic, and honestly, it doesn't need to be much more. A story in a game like this needs to 1. Not be overbearing, and 2. Act as a vehicle for Doom Guy to keep doing cool shit, and fortunately, he does plenty of cool shit. Major set pieces are insane, and some of the late game moments are just nuts. Without spoiling, I'll just say Chapter 12 and Chapter 21. When you guys play the game in a few days, trust me, you will know what I'm talking about. There are also minor moments of badassery too, like Doom Guy finding a severed arm on the ground and feeding it to his dragon, or the way every room the Slayer walks into shits bricks when he walks through the door. To vaguely assess and summarize the story, it's a prequel to the 2016 game and features the Slayer being held captive by the Makers and serving both them and the humans who are fighting off an invasion from none other than Hell. The story takes plenty of twists and turns, none of which will blow your mind, but man, is the ending satisfying. Again, broken record, I can't go into detail, but I felt like the payoff in the ending was excellent and wrapped up the journey well, which considering the last game I reviewed was Assassin's Creed Shadows, is a breath of fresh air. I think that phrase describes my general feelings towards the game, not just as a consumer, but as a reviewer too. To play a game day one that feels complete, polished, runs great, and feels like it prioritized fun above all else isn't something you see that often. I haven't been reviewing games for that long, but it's so common that a game is unpolished before launch, missing content, or is buggy and unoptimized, and I didn't feel any of this with Doom: The Dark Ages. That, and when I play games a few months early, the feedback is rarely implemented, and here, it was. So I appreciate the Dark Ages for showing so much passion in that regard, but as a product, it succeeds even more. Doom: The Dark Ages is one of those games that I finished and thought to myself, that was a fucking video game. It was pure adrenaline the whole time, full of fun moments, solid music, and ran like a dream. For a game like this, I can't ask for much more. Weapon and chapter challenges offer room for replayability, and the secrets always containing great rewards meant I was always encouraged to explore the beautifully designed environments, and again, the pacing here is so great. If someone said they wanted to get into the Doom games, then this is the game I would urge them to start with. I still believe it is Doom at its best, and I am severely impressed. The guns feel amazing, the executions are gory as hell, and the moment-to-moment gameplay is so tight between the movement, parrying, and shield abilities that I could just not get enough of it. Whether it's piloting a skyscraper-sized mech, flying a dragon, or just traditionally ripping and tearing, Doom: The Dark Ages is absolutely phenomenal. So, do I think Doom: The Dark Ages is worth the money? 100%. It's a rare sight in today's market, and I think if you are a Doom fan or even a fan of gory FPS games, this is a must play. But of course, I have been wrong before and will continue to be wrong when it comes to this stuff. So make sure you watch other reviews to get a wide net of opinions and be as informed as possible before making a purchase. Also, charging extra so players can play early is still a practice I'm not a fan of, and I'm also not a fan of including de novo, as it impacts performance and thus makes honest paying consumers have a worse end product experience than the people who pirate the game. I want to once again thank Bethesda for this review code, for flying me out to LA a few months ago, and I want to thank you all for watching. It's because of you guys that I'm allowed to do these amazing things and play these amazing games. So thank you so much for your love and support. How are you guys feeling about Doom: The Dark Ages? Will you be picking it up or waiting for a sale? If you have any questions about the game, feel free to ask it below and I will do my best to answer it to the best of my ability. Thank you so much to our patrons for supporting the channel, and I hope you all have a great rest of your day.